The Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zephyrian system, and Jake Morrison felt his heart sink. The beautiful blue planet that housed billions of peaceful aliens was covered in smoke and fire. Huge alien ships hung in orbit around the world like hungry vultures waiting to feed on the dead. "Take us to stealth mode," Jake ordered. "I want to see what we are dealing with before they see us." Lisa Parker worked at her controls, and the ship became invisible to most scanning systems. The Defiance moved closer to the planet, and the crew could see the destruction more clearly. The crystal cities that the Zephyrians were famous for were being blown apart by energy weapons. Massive ships that looked like they were made from black metal and bone were collecting the survivors. "My God," Kate Sullivan whispered from her medical station. "They are not just killing them. They are hurting them like animals." Alex Turner was the ship's intelligence analyst, and he was studying the enemy ships through their sensors. "Commander, I count 47 hostile vessels. They are using technology I have never seen before. Their ships appear to be powered by some kind of biological energy source." Jake watched the screen as smaller alien ships landed on the planet's surface. Creatures in dark armor poured out and started rounding up Zephyrian civilians. The peaceful aliens did not even try to fight back. They just stood there crying while the invaders put them in chains. "Can we identify the attackers?" Jake asked. "Yes, sir," Alex replied. "Based on the transmissions we intercepted, these are definitely the Krillian horde that Ambassador Veltar mentioned. But, Commander, their ships are not just machines. They appear to be alive somehow." Danny Rodriguez came up from engineering with a worried expression. "Commander, I have been scanning their energy signatures, and something is very wrong. Those ships are powered by what looks like life force. They are literally feeding off the fear and pain of their victims." Kate ran her own scans from the medical bay, and her face went pale. The Krillians themselves are not normal biological entities. They have some kind of symbiotic organism living inside them that makes them stronger when they cause suffering to others. Jake felt sick as he watched. More Zephyrian civilians being loaded onto the enemy ships. These were not soldiers or warriors. They were teachers and artists and mathematicians who had never hurt anyone in their lives. They were being treated like food for these monsters. "Lisa, can we target their ships without hitting any civilian areas?" "Negative, Commander. They have positioned their vessels directly over population centers. If we attack, we will kill thousands of Zephyrians." Jake wanted to blast every enemy ship in the system, but he could not risk hurting the people they came to save. Instead, he watched helplessly as more transport ships launched from the planet, carrying away captured aliens. Alex continued analyzing the enemy fleet and discovered something even more disturbing. "Commander, the Krillians are not just taking prisoners. They have built some kind of processing facilities on the planet's surface. From what I can determine, they are converting the captured Zephyrians into energy to power their war machine." "You mean they are eating them?" Kate asked. "Worse than that. They are keeping them alive while they drain their life force. The more terrified and hopeless the victims become, the more energy the Krillians can extract from them." Jake had seen evil before, but this was something beyond anything he could imagine. These creatures were not just conquering worlds, they were turning entire civilizations into batteries for their ships and weapons. "How many Zephyrians are still alive down there?" he asked. Lisa ran detailed scans of the planet's surface. "I estimate about 2 million survivors scattered across the northern continent. The rest are either dead or captured. The Krillians seem to be saving that group for last. We need to get some of those people off the planet before it is too late." Jake decided. "Alex, I want you to find me a way to rescue as many civilians as possible without alerting the entire enemy fleet." "Sir, that would require us to land on the planet and engage the enemy directly. We would be outnumbered 47 to 1. Then we better be 47 times smarter than they are. Jake called the crew together in the main conference room to plan their rescue mission. The Defiance was just one ship against an entire fleet, but they had advantages that the Krillians did not know about. Human ships were built for fighting in the worst possible conditions, and human crews were trained to think creatively when everything went wrong. Lisa studied the enemy patrol patterns and found a gap in their coverage near the northern continent where most of the survivors were hiding. If we time it right, we can get a shuttle down to the surface and back up again before they notice us. Danny worked on modifying one of their shuttles to carry more passengers. I can strip out the weapons and add emergency life support for about 50 Zephyrians. It will be cramped, but they will survive the trip. Kate prepared medical equipment for treating traumatized civilians. The survivors are probably in shock from watching their civilization get destroyed. I will need to sedate most of them just to get them on the shuttle. Alex found the location where the largest group of survivors was hiding. There is an old mine complex about 50 kilometers from the main processing facility. Thermal scans show approximately 300 Zephyrians hiding in the underground tunnels. Jake approved the plan, even though he knew it was extremely dangerous. They would have to fly through enemy-controlled spaceland on a hostile planet and evacuate terrified civilians while avoiding detection by an enemy that literally fed on fear. The shuttle launched 2 hours later with Lisa piloting and Kate providing medical support. Jake stayed on the bridge to coordinate the mission and watch for enemy patrols. The small craft flew low through the planet's atmosphere, using the smoke from burning cities to hide from sensors. They landed near the mine entrance and Kate went inside to find the survivors. What she found broke her heart. Hundreds of Zephyrians were huddled together in the dark tunnels, crying softly and holding their children. When they saw Kate in her human uniform, they thought she was another enemy soldier coming to take them away. "Please do not hurt us," one elderly Zephyrian begged. "We have done nothing wrong. We are peaceful people." Kate knelt down beside the frightened alien and spoke in the gentle voice she used with scared patience. "We are here to help you. My name is Kate, and I am from Earth. We received your message asking for help, and we came as fast as we could." The Zephyrians looked at her with confusion. They had heard stories about the dangerous humans from the Deathworld, but this small female did not look scary at all. She had kind eyes and a soft voice, and she was offering them hope when they thought all hope was lost. "You came to help us?" the elderly Zephyrian asked. "But why would you risk your lives for strangers?" Kate helped the alien to his feet and started guiding the group toward the shuttle. "Because that is what friends do, and anyone who asks for help becomes our friend." Loading 300 terrified aliens into a shuttle designed for 50 people was not easy, but somehow they made it work. The Zephyrians were thin and did not take up much space, and they were so grateful to be rescued that they did not complain about being crowded together. As the shuttle lifted off from the planet's surface, Kate looked back at the burning cities and the processing facilities where thousands more Zephyrians were suffering. They had saved 300 people, but millions more were still trapped down there. "Do not worry," she told the rescued aliens. "This is just the beginning. More humans are coming, and we will not stop until all of your people are free." The shuttle docked with the Defiance, and the crew helped the refugees get settled in cargo bays that had been converted into temporary living quarters. The Zephyrians had never seen the inside of a human warship before, and they were amazed by how everything was built for fighting. Jake came down to meet the refugees and was surprised when they did not seem afraid of him. One young Zephyrian child walked up to him and took his hand. "Are you going to fight the bad monsters?" the child asked. Jake knelt down, so he was at the child's eye level. "Yes, we are. And we are going to win." The child smiled for the first time since the attack began. "Good. The monsters are very mean, and they hurt my friends." Jake stood up and looked at all the rescued aliens. They were looking at him and his crew with hope and trust that he knew they would have to earn. These people had lost everything, but they still believed that the humans would save them. "Send a message to Earth Command," he told Alex. "Tell them we need every ship they can spare. This is not just about one planet anymore. This is about stopping something evil before it destroys everything good in the galaxy." Admiral Susan Blake stood in the command center of Earth Defense Headquarters, watching dozens of screens showing human military forces preparing for war. In the 72 hours since Jake Morrison's message arrived, Earth had transformed from a peaceful world into a military machine that would have terrified the ancient Romans. Ships that had been sitting in mothballs for decades were being brought back online and loaded with weapons that the Federation considered too brutal for civilized warfare. The massive dreadnought UES Retribution was being prepared for its first combat mission in 20 years under the command of Captain Roy Henderson. Dozens of heavy cruisers and destroyers were loading supplies and ammunition while their crews ran final combat drills. Admiral the 3rd Marine Division is ready for deployment, reported Colonel Maria Santos. She was a veteran of the Titan colony conflicts and had trained her soldiers to fight in conditions that would kill most other species. Her Marines wore powered armor that could survive in the vacuum of space and carried plasma rifles that could melt through solid steel. Blake looked at the tactical display showing the fleet assembly. Every ship was crewed by volunteers who had asked to join the mission after seeing the footage from the Zephyrian system. Word had spread quickly through the human military about aliens who fed on fear and pain, and every soldier wanted a chance to fight them. "What is our total force strength, Maria?" 47 major warships, including the Retribution, plus support vessels and transports. 12,000 Marines ready for ground combat and planetary assault. We also have the new experimental weapons that the research division has been working on. Blake nodded. The experimental weapons included sonic cannons that could disrupt alien nervous systems and electromagnetic pulse bombs that could shut down enemy electronics. They were designed specifically for fighting non-human enemies and had never been tested in real combat. Captain Henderson reported from the Retribution that his ship was ready for departure. The huge vessel was over a kilometer long and carried enough firepower to destroy small moons. Its armor was thick enough to survive direct hits from asteroid impacts, and its weapons could reach targets on the other side of a solar system. "Admiral, we are receiving updates from Commander Morrison," the communications officer announced. "The Krillians have moved to attack the Altair system, where the Nereid homeworld is located. He is requesting immediate support." Blake studied the star charts and realized what the enemy was doing. They were not just randomly attacking systems. They were moving in a pattern designed to cut off the core Federation worlds from their outer colonies. If this continued, the entire galaxy would be divided and conquered piece by piece. "Order the fleet to depart immediately for the Altair system. We cannot let another peaceful species get destroyed while we prepare for battle." The human fleet moved out of Earth orbit like a pack of wolves heading for a hunt. Every ship had been designed and built by a species that evolved on a world where everything tried to kill them. Human military technology focused on overwhelming firepower applied with surgical precision. The journey to Altair took 6 days, and during that time the crews studied everything they knew about their enemy. The Krillians were silicon-based life forms who lived by consuming the life essence of other species. They had been traveling through space for thousands of years, destroying entire civilizations and growing stronger with each victory. Colonel Santos briefed her Marines on enemy biology and tactics. "These things are tough, and they heal fast, but they have weaknesses. They need to feed on fear and pain to maintain their strength. If we can stay calm and focused, They become just another enemy to eliminate. The Marines practiced urban combat, techniques and boarding actions. They would likely have to fight inside enemy ships and on planetary surfaces where civilians might be present. Human military doctrine emphasized protecting innocent life even during the most violent combat. Pete Johnson worked with the engineering teams to understand captured Krillian technology. They had managed to salvage some equipment from destroyed enemy scouts and learned disturbing facts about how it worked. The alien ships were powered by the screams of their victims, and their weapons became stronger when they caused suffering. "Admiral, we have discovered something important," Johnson reported. "The Krillian biotechnology requires a constant supply of psychic energy to function. Humans appear to be naturally resistant to this type of energy absorption. Our thoughts and emotions are somehow shielded from their feeding process. This was valuable intelligence. It meant that human forces would not make the enemy stronger just by fighting them. In fact, the opposite might be true. Human determination and courage could actually weaken the Krillians by denying them the fear they needed to survive." The fleet arrived at the Altair system to find the battle already in progress. The Nereid homeworld was under attack by a massive Krillian force, while Commander Morrison's small fleet tried to defend the aquatic aliens. The ocean world was being bombarded from orbit, and millions of Nereids were trapped underwater with no way to escape. "All ships prepare for combat," Admiral Blake ordered. "We are going in hard and fast. Target priority is enemy ships over population centers." The human fleet decloaked directly inside the enemy formation, using a tactic so aggressive that even veteran crews were shocked. Most species would never risk materializing their ships that close to enemy weapons, but humans had been taking crazy risks since they first learned to make fire. Captain Henderson led the assault on the largest Krillian ship, while smaller human vessels engaged enemy escorts. The Retribution's massive guns opened fire at point-blank range, tearing through alien armor like paper. The enemy had never faced weapons designed by a species that considered nuclear explosions to be acceptable mining tools. Marines prepare. For boarding action, Colonel Santos ordered as human assault shuttles launched toward disabled enemy vessels. Her soldiers wore armor that could survive in molten lava and carried weapons that could punch through starship hulls. They were trained to fight in the worst conditions possible, and these aliens were about to learn what that meant. The first boarding party breached the hull of a Krillian cruiser and found themselves in corridors designed to intimidate through. Horror. The walls were covered with the preserved remains of previous victims, and the air was filled with the sounds of suffering. Most Federation species would have been paralyzed with fear, but the humans just checked their weapons and moved forward. Sergeant Billy Cooper led his squad through the alien ship, hunting for the command center. The Krillians they encountered were larger and stronger than humans, but they fought like individual warriors instead of coordinated soldiers. Human military training emphasized teamwork and mutual support, which gave them a massive advantage. Contact. Front, Cooper reported as his squad encountered a group of Krillian warriors. The aliens were 8 feet tall, with armored skin and claws that could tear through steel, but they had never fought opponents who used suppressing fire and flanking maneuvers. The human Marines moved like a pack of hunting animals using their weapons to pin down enemies, while other soldiers moved to better positions. Within minutes, the Krillian warriors were dead, and the humans were moving deeper into the ship. Meanwhile, Captain Henderson was fighting his way toward the enemy flagship. The Krillian commander was a massive creature called Warlord Gazaroth, who had conquered dozens of worlds. He had never encountered an enemy that fought with such controlled violence and tactical precision. "Impossible," Gazaroth snarled as human. Borders overran his ship's defenses. These soft creatures should be cowering in fear, not attacking us like mad beasts. But the humans were not mad beasts. They were soldiers doing their job with professional efficiency. They cleared each section of the ship systematically while protecting captured prisoners and securing vital intelligence. This was not random. Violence but carefully applied force designed to achieve specific objectives. The space battle raged for 6 hours while human and Krillian forces traded devastating attacks. The aliens had superior numbers, but human ships were tougher, and their crews were better trained. More importantly, the humans were fighting to protect innocent life, while the Krillians were only interested in feeding on fear. When the last enemy ship was destroyed or captured, the human fleet turned its attention to rescuing survivors on the empty planet below. The Nereids were aquatic aliens who lived in underwater cities that the Krillians could not easily attack. Human submarines and diving teams worked to evacuate civilians to safety. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the Nereid government," the communications officer reported. "They want to thank us for saving their world." Blake accepted the transmission and found herself looking at a grateful alien leader whose people had just been saved from extinction. The Nereid looked at her with tears in his large eyes and spoke in a voice filled with emotion. "We cannot repay you for what you have done. Our children will grow up free because of your courage. How can we ever thank the humans for their sacrifice?" Blake thought about all the young soldiers who had died in the battle and all the families back on Earth who would never see their loved ones again. Then she thought about the millions of Nereids who would live because humans were willing to fight for strangers. 3 months after the battle at Altair, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, watching enemy ships gather around the Procyon system. He had been promoted after saving 12 worlds from Krillian attacks, but each victory had cost human lives, and he could feel the weight of command pressing down on his shoulders. The war had spread across the galaxy as more peaceful species fell to the alien invaders. Human forces were stretched thin, trying to protect dozens of worlds while the Krillians seemed to have unlimited ships and soldiers. Every battle was harder than the last as the enemy learned to counter human tactics. "Admiral, we have 3 million Altarian refugees in the Procyon system," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Parker. She had been with him since the beginning and had seen too many good people die in this war. "If the Krillians break through our defenses, all those civilians will be captured or killed." Jake studied the tactical display showing enemy fleet positions. The Krillians had brought their largest force, yet led by something called Supreme Warlord Drachmoth. Intelligence reports said this creature had consumed the life essence of entire star systems and was thousands of years old. "How many ships do they have?" Jake asked. "Over 200 major vessels plus support craft. We have 40 ships, and they are all running low on ammunition and spare parts." The numbers were not good, but Jake had learned that humans could win battles, even when they were outnumbered if they were smart about it. The key was making the enemy fight on human terms, instead of letting them use their superior numbers effectively. Colonel Maria Santos reported from the surface of Procyon 4, where her Marines were setting up defensive positions. "Admiral, we have prepared fallback positions for the refugees, but if the Krillians land in force, we will not be able to hold them for long." Jake knew that Santos was being optimistic. Her Marines were exhausted from months of continuous fighting, and they were facing an enemy that grew stronger by feeding on the fear of their victims. But human soldiers had never learned how to give up, and they would fight until the last bullet was fired. The communication system chimed with an incoming message, and Jake hoped it was reinforcements from Earth. Instead, it was Captain Ben Foster, commanding the U's Guardian. His old friend looked tired and worried as he appeared on the screen. "Jake, we have a problem. The Krillians have some kind of new weapon that can disable our ships without destroying them. They used it on the Defiant and captured the entire crew." Jake felt his blood turn cold. Captured humans would be tortured for information, and then fed to the Krillian biotechnology. It was a fate worse than death, and every human soldier carried suicide charges to avoid it. "Do we know how the weapon works?" Jake asked. "Negative. It seems to be some kind of neural disruptor that overloads human nervous systems. The crew is unconscious, but alive when the Krillians take them." This was bad news. Human resistance to Krillian psychic feeding had been one of their main advantages in the war. If the enemy had found a way around that defense, then human forces would become just another source of food for the aliens. Dr. Kate Sullivan had been working on captured Krillian biotechnology, and she thought she might have found something important. "Admiral, I have been studying the symbiotic organisms that give the Krillians their power. I think I know why humans are resistant to their feeding process." "Tell me, Kate." "The Krillian parasites feed on specific brain chemistry associated with fear and despair. Human brains produce different chemicals when we are afraid. Instead of panic, we tend to get angry, and that anger makes us fight harder. The parasites cannot process human anger the same way they process alien fear. This explained why human forces had been so effective against the Krillians. Every time humans got scared, they got mad, and when humans got mad, they became more dangerous instead of less dangerous. It was exactly the opposite of what the aliens expected." "Can we use this information to develop better weapons?" Jake asked. "I think so. If we can create a weapon that triggers the anger response in human brain chemistry, we might be able to poison any Krillian that tries to feed on us." Jake approved Kate's research project, even though he knew they might not have time to develop new weapons before the enemy attacked. The Krillian fleet was already moving toward Procyon and would arrive within hours. The first phase of the battle began when enemy scout ships tried to probe human defenses. Captain Roy Henderson led a squadron of heavy cruisers to intercept them, and found himself facing Krillian vessels, unlike anything they had encountered before. These ships were larger and more heavily armed, and they seemed to be powered by pure hatred. "Admiral, these are not normal Krillian vessels," Henderson reported. "They appear to be organic constructs grown specifically for war. Their weapons are actually living creatures that fire concentrated bursts of psychic energy." Jake realized that the enemy had been evolving their technology based on what they learned from fighting humans. The Krillians were adapting faster than human forces could develop countermeasures. This war was becoming a race between human innovation and alien evolution. The main battle began when Supreme Warlord Drachmoth's flagship entered the system. The massive vessel was over 3 kilometers long and appeared to be constructed from the bones of dead worlds. It radiated an aura of malevolence that could be felt even through the vacuum of space. "All ships concentrate fire on the enemy flagship," Jake ordered. "Take that thing down before it can deploy whatever weapons it is carrying." Human ships opened fire with everything they had, but their weapons seemed to have little effect on the enemy vessel. The alien ship's hull absorbed energy blasts and kinetic rounds without taking significant damage. It was as if the ship was alive and could heal itself. "Admiral, we are being hailed by the enemy flagship," Lisa reported. Jake decided to accept the transmission and found himself looking at the most terrifying creature he had ever seen. Supreme Warlord Drachmoth was a massive Krillian who had been enhanced by thousands of years of consuming other species. Its eyes glowed with stolen life force, and its voice sounded like the screams of the dying. "Human Admiral, I offer you a choice. Surrender your fleet, and I will make your deaths quick. Resist, and I will feed your crews to my children one piece at a time." Jake looked at the alien monster and felt the familiar human response to being threatened. He got angry. "Here is my counteroffer. Leave this system immediately, and I might let some of your ships escape when we destroy your fleet." Drachmoth laughed with a sound like breaking glass. "Foolish creature. I have consumed entire civilizations. Your pathetic species will be just another meal. We will see about that. Jake cut the transmission and prepared for the hardest battle of his life. The Krillian fleet outnumbered human forces 5-1, and their supreme warlord had powers that defied understanding. But humans had faced impossible odds before and found ways to win. The battle raged for 12 hours as both sides took heavy casualties. Human ships fought with desperate courage while Krillian vessels pressed their numerical advantage. Several human cruisers were destroyed, and their crews died fighting to the last man. Captain Foster's ship, the Guardian, was hit by the new Krillian neural weapon and lost power. Jake watched helplessly as enemy boarding craft attached to his friend's vessel. Within minutes, the Krillians had captured the entire crew and were broadcasting their torture across human military channels. "Jake, help us," Foster screamed as alien creatures began draining his life force. "Do not let them take us alive." Jake tried to target the Guardian with his ship's weapons to give his friend a clean death, but Krillian ships moved to block his line of fire. They wanted the humans to watch their comrades suffer. They wanted to break human morale by showing them what happened to captured soldiers. But the aliens had made a mistake. Instead of breaking human spirits, the torture of their friends made the humans angrier than they had ever been in their lives. Every human ship in the fleet began fighting with a fury that shocked even veteran crews. Colonel Santos led a boarding action against one of the ships, holding human prisoners. Her Marines fought through alien defenses with a cold determination that terrified their enemies. These were not soldiers anymore. They were avenging angels who would not stop until every human prisoner was free. "Take no prisoners," Santos ordered as her troops cleared alien ships room by room. "These things chose to torture our people. Now they pay the price." The human counterattack was so fierce that the Krillians began to retreat. They had expected the torture to weaken human resistance, but instead it had unleashed something primal and terrifying. Humans fighting to save their friends were the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Jake managed to rescue some of the captured crew, but Ben Foster died in his arms after being drained by alien parasites. His friend's last words were a warning about something even worse than the Krillians. "Jake, they are not the real enemy. There is something called the hunger coming. The Krillians are just preparing the way for something much worse." As Foster died, Jake realized that this war was bigger than anyone had imagined. The Krillians were not just conquering worlds. They were preparing the galaxy for an invasion by something that made them look harmless. Humanity would have to become even stronger if they hoped to survive what was coming. Admiral Jake Morrison stood before the largest fleet in human history as it prepared for the final battle against the sea Krillian horde. 6 months of war had led to this moment at the galactic core, where ancient space stations orbited a massive black hole. Intelligence reports confirmed that the aliens were using these stations to summon something called the hunger from another dimension. That the combined human and alien fleet included not just military vessels, but converted civilian ships, crewed by volunteers from dozens of species. Peaceful Zephyrians served as tactical analysts, using their mathematical genius to calculate attack patterns. Aquatic Nereids provided underwater assault capabilities for boarding actions. Even the timid Hesperians had volunteered as communications specialists inspired by human courage. "Admiral, we have 1,500 ships ready for battle," reported Admiral Susan Blake, who had come from Earth to coordinate the assault. "This is everyone we could gather from across the galaxy. If we fail here, there will be no second chance." Jake looked at the tactical display showing the enemy positions. The Krillians had fortified the ancient stations with bio-organic weapons and energy shields powered by the suffering of their captives. Millions of aliens from conquered worlds were being held in processing facilities that fed their life force into massive summoning arrays. Captain Roy, Henderson commanded the UES Retribution, which would lead the assault on the primary station. His crew had been reinforced with alien volunteers who wanted to fight alongside the humans who had saved their worlds. The massive dreadnought carried experimental weapons designed specifically for this battle, including quantum torpedoes that could disrupt interdimensional portals. Roy, your mission is to destroy the central summoning beacon before the hunger can fully manifest, Jake explained during the final briefing. Our intelligence suggests that the portal is already partially open and something is trying to come through from the other side. Henderson nodded grimly. He had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. The central station was the most heavily defended target in the system, and reaching it would require flying through concentrated enemy fire while carrying enough explosives to crack a moon. Colonel Maria Santos prepared her Marines for the largest ground assault in human military history. They would have to fight their way through processing facilities to free the alien prisoners whose life force was powering the summoning ritual. Every person they saved would weaken the enemy's ability to maintain the interdimensional portal. Remember, people, we are not just fighting to win this battle, Santos told her troops. We are fighting to save every innocent person in this galaxy. The Krillians think they can use fear and suffering to power their war machine, but they have never met humans who turn fear into anger and anger into victory. Dr. Kate Sullivan had developed new medical treatments for humans who had been exposed to Krillian psychic weapons. Her research had also led to the creation of mental shields that could protect human minds from alien influence. Every soldier in the fleet carried devices that would prevent them from being turned into food for the enemy. The battle began with the largest space engagement in galactic history, as 1,500 Allied ships faced off against 3,000 Krillian vessels. The enemy had pulled forces from across their empire to defend the summoning stations, and their fleet included creatures that defied description. Some ships appeared to be made from living bone, while others pulsed with stolen life force. All ships engage at will, Jake ordered. Target priority is anything that looks like it is powering the summoning arrays. We need to disrupt their ritual before whatever they are calling gets through. Human ships led the charge, using their superior armor and firepower to punch holes in enemy formations. The converted civilian vessels followed behind, providing support. Fire and rescue operations for damaged military ships. Aliens who had never fought before found themselves manning weapons, stations, and damage control teams. The space battle was unlike anything that had ever been seen before. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes, while energy beams lanced across the darkness between stars. Human vessels used ramming attacks and close-range weapons, while alien ships provided long-range fire support and electronic warfare capabilities. Captain Henderson guided the Retribution through the enemy fleet toward the central station. His ship took massive damage from Krillian bioweapons, but the crew kept fighting even as sections of the vessel were destroyed around them. Alien volunteers worked alongside human engineers to keep the ship operational. Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the central station, reported his communications officer. It appears to be Supreme Warlord Drachmoth. Henderson accepted the transmission and found himself looking at the ancient Krillian leader, who had grown even more powerful by consuming the life force of captured humans. The alien's eyes burned with stolen energy, and its voice carried the screams of the dying. Foolish humans, you cannot stop what has already begun. The hunger awakens, and soon it will devour your entire reality. Your courage will be meaningless when existence itself comes to an end. Maybe, Henderson replied, but we are going to die trying to stop you, and that is what makes us different from you. We fight for others while you only fight for yourself. The Retribution reached the central station and began its assault on the main summoning beacon. The ancient structure was protected by energy shields and bioorganic weapons that fired concentrated bursts of psychic energy. Human engineers worked frantically to penetrate the defenses, while enemy forces tried to destroy them. Meanwhile, Colonel Santos led her Marines in ground assaults on the processing facilities scattered throughout the station complex. Her soldiers fought through corridors filled with the preserved remains of previous victims while rescuing alien prisoners who had been kept alive to power the summoning ritual. Sergeant Billy Cooper led his squad through a facility where thousands of Zephyrians were being slowly drained of life force. The peaceful aliens were barely conscious, but they managed to smile when they saw human soldiers coming to save them. Even in their darkest hour, they had faith that the humans would find a way to help them. "Get these people to the evacuation shuttles," Cooper ordered as his medics began treating the weakened prisoners. "Every person we save makes the enemy weaker and us stronger." The ground fighting was brutal as human Marines faced Krillian warriors, enhanced by thousands of years of consuming other species. But the aliens had never fought opponents who got stronger when their friends were threatened. Human soldiers fought with a controlled fury that overwhelmed enemy defenses. Back on the Retribution, Captain Henderson had reached the central beacon chamber where the interdimensional portal was being maintained. He could see something massive and terrible trying to push through from the other side. The Hunger was a cosmic entity that existed to consume entire realities and turn them into nothing. "All hands prepare for final assault," Henderson announced over the ship's communication system. "We are going to ram the beacon and detonate our entire payload. It has been an honor serving with all of you." The crew responded with a cheer that could be heard throughout the ship. Human and alien volunteers working together for one last desperate attempt to save the galaxy. Henderson aimed the damaged dreadnought directly at the summoning beacon and ordered, "Maximum power to the engines." Supreme Warlord Drachmoth appeared in the beacon chamber to make a final stand against the human assault. The ancient alien had consumed the life force of billions of beings and considered itself invincible. But it had never faced a human who was willing to die to protect others. Henderson fought the alien monster hand to hand while his ship plowed through the station's defenses. The Krillian was stronger and faster, but the human had something the alien could never understand. He was not fighting for himself, but for every innocent person in the galaxy. "You cannot win, human," Drachmoth snarled as they struggled near the portal controls. "Even if you destroy this beacon, the Hunger will find another way through. Your sacrifice is meaningless." Henderson managed to reach the ship's self-destruct controls and smiled at his enemy. "Maybe you are right, but at least I tried, and that is what makes me human." The Retribution exploded in a blast that could be seen across the solar system. The summoning beacon was destroyed, and the interdimensional portal collapsed, sending the Hunger back to whatever dimension it came from. Supreme Warlord Drachmoth was vaporized along with the ancient station dot. The destruction of the central beacon caused a chain reaction that disabled summoning arrays throughout the system. Krillian. Ships began losing power as their bio-organic weapons failed without a steady supply of life force. The alien fleet started to retreat as their technological advantage disappeared. Colonel Santos and her Marines continued rescuing prisoners from the remaining processing facilities, while Admiral Blake coordinated the pursuit of fleeing enemy vessels. The battle was won, but the cost had been terrible. Hundreds of ships were destroyed, and thousands of good people were dead. Jake Morrison surveyed the aftermath of the greatest battle in galactic history and felt the weight of command pressing down on his shoulders. They had saved the galaxy, but so many brave souls had died to make it possible. The morning sun rose over Kepler Colony 7 like it had for the past 30 years. Commander Zara Velnoth stood at her office window, watching the golden light paint the mountains beyond the mining complex. 3 million Zalani had made this world their home, building cities that gleamed like jewels against the purple grass plains. The terraforming project had been their greatest success, turning a dead rock into a paradise that rivaled their homeworld. Zara sipped her morning tea and reviewed the daily reports on her tablet. Production numbers looked good, the weather systems were stable, and the latest cargo ships had departed on schedule. Life on Kepler 442b was peaceful, predictable, and profitable. The Jelani had carved out a perfect little corner of the galaxy, where they could live without worry. That piece shattered at exactly 9:15 local time. The first alarm came from Orbital Station 3. Lieutenant Kev Talhana's voice crackled through the communication system with barely controlled panic. "Commander, we have multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the system edge. Large vessels, unknown configuration." Zara set down her teacup and activated the main display screen. The tactical readout showed 3 massive objects moving toward their planet at high speed. Each ship was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the largest Zilani vessels. Their design was unlike anything in the galactic database, angular, mechanical, and threatening. "Send standard greeting protocols," Zara ordered, though something cold was already forming in her stomach. "All frequencies, all languages." The response came not in words, but in action. The unknown ships deployed smaller craft by the hundreds, spreading across space like a dark cloud. Scanner readings showed they were heading directly for Kepler 442b with obvious hostile intent. Captain Nel Veo Kess commanded the colony's defense fleet from the patrol ship Bright Star. His 12 vessels were designed for police work and asteroid mining, not military combat. Still, he moved his ships into defensive positions and tried to buy time for the civilians below. "Unknown vessels, you are approaching Zelani territory without permission," Nell broadcast. "State your intentions or withdraw immediately." The answer came in the form of energy beams that cut through space like burning swords. The patrol ship Dawnlight vanished in a ball of fire before its crew could even scream. 2 more ships died in the next few seconds, their hulls torn apart by weapons that made Zelani technology look like children's toys. Nell ordered his remaining ships to scatter and run. It was the only sensible choice against such overwhelming firepower. But even as he retreated, he could see the enemy's true purpose becoming clear. The massive ships weren't here to conquer or communicate. They were here to consume. The first harvesting machines landed on Kepler 442b's surface within an hour of the fleet's arrival. They were the size of office buildings, moving on multiple legs like giant metal spiders. Wherever they went, they began to tear apart everything in their path. Trees, rocks, buildings, and even the soil itself disappeared into their grinding maws. Zara watched in horror as the machines marched across the countryside toward the nearest city. Emergency sirens wailed across the colony as millions of people tried to evacuate or find shelter. But where could they go when the enemy was eating the planet itself? "Commander, we're getting reports from all sectors," her aide reported with a trembling voice. "The machines are everywhere. They're not just attacking the cities. They're consuming the forests, the mountains, even the oceans." The Zelani had faced many challenges during their expansion across the stars, but nothing like this. These invaders weren't interested in negotiation, conquest, or even simple destruction. They were systematically dismantling their entire world. Zara activated the colony's emergency protocols and began the largest evacuation in Zelani history. Underground shelters that had been built for natural disasters became refuges for entire cities. Transport ships that normally carried mining equipment now ferried desperate families to orbital stations. But even as the evacuation proceeded, everyone knew it was hopeless. The orbital stations couldn't support 3 million people for more. In a few days, the identity of their attackers became clear when the colony's main computer finally matched the invading ships to entries in the galactic database. They were called the Devourers, a machine intelligence that had been consuming worlds for thousands of years. Most civilizations simply evacuated when they appeared, abandoning entire planets rather than face their overwhelming power. The Devourers followed a simple pattern. They would arrive at a world, deploy their harvesting machines, and systematically consume every useful material they could find. Metals, organic compounds, water, atmosphere. Everything became raw materials for their endless expansion. When they finished, they left behind dead rocks floating in space. Captain Nell limped back to the orbital stations with only 4 ships remaining from his original fleet of 12. His crews were exhausted and traumatized, but they kept working to evacuate civilians from the planet's surface. Every trip down meant facing the growing swarms of Devourer fighters that now controlled the skies. "How long do we have?" Zara asked her science officer during an emergency meeting in the underground command center. Based on their current consumption rate, perhaps 72 hours before they begin processing the atmosphere itself, came the grim reply. "After that, nothing will survive on the surface." Zara stared at the tactical display showing the advancing wall of destruction. Red markers indicated where Devourer machines had already stripped the land bare. Yellow zones showed areas under active attack. The green zones representing untouched territory were shrinking by the hour. "What about help from our allies?" someone asked. "The Confederacy, the trade union. Surely someone will respond to our distress calls?" "I'd sent emergency broadcasts on all channels," the communications officer reported. "But the nearest Confederate fleet is engaged with raiders 3 systems away. The trade union says they cannot spare any ships. Everyone else is either too far away or already dealing with their own crisis." The bitter truth was that the galaxy's major powers were stretched thin. Wars, territorial disputes, and their own internal problems left little room for rescue missions to distant colonies. The Zalani were valuable trading partners, but not valuable enough to risk entire fleets against the Devours. As the situation became more desperate, Zara made the hardest decision of her career. She authorized the activation of the colony's emergency beacon, a device that would broadcast their distress call across the entire galaxy on every known frequency. It was a last resort that announced their weakness to every potential enemy within range. But they had no choice. The message was simple and heartbreaking. "This is Kepler Mining Colony 7. We are under attack by Devourer forces. 3 million. Civilians need immediate evacuation. Any Allied vessels in range, please respond. We have perhaps 72 hours before total planetary consumption begins." The signal raced across space faster than light, reaching monitoring stations and listening posts throughout the galaxy. Most receivers belonged to civilizations that already knew about the attack and had decided they couldn't help. A few belonged to species that had never heard of the Zalani and didn't care about distant wars. But one receiver was different. In a small monitoring station orbiting Earth's moon, a young human named Jake Morrison was pulling a routine shift when something unprecedented happened. The universal translation systems lit up with an alien voice calling for help across the void. Jake had dreamed of this moment his entire life. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe, and now he had proof that they weren't. But the message wasn't a greeting or an invitation to join some galactic community. It was a desperate cry for help from people who were about to die. He stared at the translated text on his screen, reading it over and over to make sure he understood correctly. 3 million innocent beings were trapped on a dying world, begging for rescue from anyone who might hear their call. The young communications specialist had a choice to make that would change everything for both humanity and the galaxy beyond.